Let's get things kicked off by taking a look at some of the top storylines heading into week 2 as we go into our 4-minute offense. One of the Northeast's most storied rivalries is back this weekend as Holy Cross and Boston College meet up in Chestnut Hill. Now, this is a game that dates back to 1896. This game used to draw some of the largest crowds in New England, and because of that, the game was normally held at larger venues like the 1916 game that took place at Fenway Park. Boston College leads this overall series, which hasn't been played since 1986, 48-31 in 3 ties. The 1942 game is the most famous between the two, as the Crusaders upset Boston College 55-12, spoiling the Eagles' undefeated season. This past spring, I went up to Holy Cross to ask head coach Bob Chesney about this rivalry and what it means for this program to be able to play Boston College again, and here's what he had to say.
Coach, when you travel around town, and you read the internet, all you hear is, oh, man, when we're going to play Boston College? When we're going to play Boston College, right? When we're going to restart that rivalry. Yeah. And now that it's back on the schedule, that's a big game in this area. How important is that rivalry, and how excited are you to be a part of it for the first time in some time?
Yeah, I think very excited to be a part of it. To be honest, we win that game or lose that game, it doesn't have a whole lot of ramifications towards us, reaching our goal of winning the conference and making it to the playoffs. But at the same time, it is something that is steeped in tradition, and there's a whole book written about it, and I've had a chance to read that. My father's read it. We talk about the notes and everything that come with it. So those are the things to me that when I look at that, there's a lot in there. There's a lot in there that I think brings our alumni, brings our community, and brings the whole Northeast together in a very different way. So it's awesome. It's very, we're excited to be there. But in the end, the game in number 1 against Colgate in week 1 is much more important. The game as we get down into Lehigh and Lafayette and all the other teams that we play in the Patriot League, those are significantly more important in the grand scheme of things than the BC game. The BC game, though, is awesome to be back on the schedule. We're very excited to be able to compete against those guys, and I think it shows a commitment from our administration to not only say, that to talk about wanting to be the best, but actually schedule it then, build it, put the building up if you want to be the best, and then recruit the best student athletes that you possibly can. That's talking about being the best, and that's really a true sign and indication of our desire to be there.
And you can catch this game Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time at Alumni Stadium on Boston College campus, or on television on the ACC Network or the Watch ESPN app. There were a lot of coaching changes this offseason in the FCS, but 2 have instantly stuck out to me as home run hires: North Carolina A&T's Sam Washington and Prairie View A&M's Eric Dooley. The returns on the investment have been immediate, and you've seen stellar play on the field for both squads. In Coach Washington's case, his A&T Aggies have upset both Jacksonville State and East Carolina of the FBS en route to a 2-0 start to the season, climbing to number 6 in the AFCA FCS Top 25 Coaches poll. While in Texas, Dooley's Panthers nearly upset Rice, losing on a last-second field goal, and completely dominated North Carolina Central in the MEAC SWAC Challenge this past weekend. Both teams look like they've taken the new message very well and figure to be prominent players in their respective conferences the rest of the way. Who knows, these two may be on a collision course to the Celebration Bowl come December in Atlanta, Georgia on ABC. What an upset in the FCS last week as the Butler Bulldogs of the Pioneer League went into Stanball Stadium and upset the Youngstown State Penguins. What was impressive about this game was that the Bulldogs were down and came roaring back to pull off the shocker. Now, does this say more about Youngstown State, or does it say more about the Butler Bulldogs? I think both things can be true in this situation, so we'll see how both teams respond this week as they take the field against West Virginia and Taylor University, respectively. And speaking of upsets, last week we saw 5 FBS programs go down to FCS opponents as UC Davis knocked off San Jose State, Villanova bested Temple, Nichols won in overtime against Kansas, and Northern Arizona ran past UTEP in a game that they were actually favored in. And also North Carolina A&T came back to defeat East Carolina in a game that was moved to Sunday because of the inclement weather on Saturday afternoon. We always say this, but it just goes to show you that on any given Saturday, you can take a loss no matter the opponent. Credit to these coaches and players for being ready for the opportunity and the spotlight last weekend as they walked away with the W. And what a great segue into who should be on upset alert this weekend, as we have a few games earmarked that could get a bit interesting this upcoming Saturday. The Howard Bison nearly pulled off the upset last week against the Ohio Bobcats and come into week 2 with another MAC opponent in their sights as they take on the Kent State Golden Flashes. What will be key in this ball game for the Bison is ball security. That was an issue last year in this particular ball game and also last week against Ohio. Can they protect the ball will be huge. On the other side of it, can they stop the run? When you look back at last season, they had Kent State beat but couldn't get off the field defensively to finish the drill. Now, the Golden Flashes have issues of their own along the lines of scrimmage, and I think they'll have issues in containing quarterback Kalen Newton and the go-go offense. I like Howard to win this one. Southern Utah travels to Corvallis to take on Oregon State. The Thunderbirds were upset last week by FCS newcomer North Alabama and are looking to do the same thing to the Beavers. If we're being honest, I think both teams in this game are evenly matched, so it should be a really good contest. It was the Beaver defense that was the culprit last week against Ohio State, giving up big play after big play. Now, the T-Birds quarterback Chris Helbig looked impressive last week, throwing for over 300 yards and 2 touchdowns with wide receiver Ty Rutledge on the receiving end of 161 of those yards and 1 of those touchdowns. They'll have their success against Oregon State. I just think the Beavers will be able to avoid the upset in this one. I like Oregon State. Whew, what a doozy we have here in New Orleans as the Nichols Colonels take on the Tulane Green Wave. This is going to be one hell of a game because you're going to see a ton of dynamic talent on display with Nichols quarterback Chase Fourcade and wide receiver Damon Jean-Pierre and Tulane's quarterback Jonathan Banks and wide receiver Terran Ankelad. The Colonels are a really good defensive football team with Sully Leach leading the way. The junior defensive lineman finished last week with 5 tackles, 4 TFLs, and 2 sacks against the Kansas Jayhawks. Tulane struggled against the pass last week against Wake Forest in an overtime loss. Their defense has to do a better job on 3rd down if they want to be successful. We'll see a lot of points scored in this one, but I look for Tulane to be able to sneak by the Colonels and avoid the upset. This game was very close last year between Sam Houston State and Prairie View A&M, so I would expect another very good contest as the Bearcats kick off their 2018 season with this particular game. The Panthers having played 2 games already, so from a cohesiveness standpoint, they should be slightly ahead of Casey Keeler's group. Sam Houston State will be breaking in a new quarterback this year in Mike Dorey, the Rutgers transfer. But the good part is that they won't be breaking in a lot of new offensive weapons or offensive linemen, as both Davion Davis and Nathan Stewart returned, and their offensive line looks stout, giving Sam Houston State once again an explosive component to their passing game. For Prairie View, I've been impressed so far with quarterback Jalen Morton, running back DeWanya Tucker, and wide receiver Tristan Wallace. They can really light up the scoreboard against anyone. This game will boil down to 2 things: penalties and defense. We've seen a lot of penalties from the Panthers, and with any opening game, you would expect some from the Bearcats as well. The difference will be along the offensive line. That's the matchup where the Bearcats have the advantage, led by Chris Stewart, the defensive lineman who had 13 sacks last season. I think their defensive line will make things very difficult for the Panthers, and they'll avoid being knocked off by Prairie View. I'll take Sam Houston State. Staying in the state of Texas for another game of intrigue between Texas Southern and Texas State. Which offensive line will show up for either team in this game will be the difference. Both offensive lines struggled in week 1. The Tigers were able to overcome those struggles to knock off UT Permian Basin, while the Bobcats couldn't, and they lost to Rutgers despite forcing 3 turnovers. That's the other part of the coin that'll determine the outcome: turnovers. Can both quarterbacks protect the football and find some balance on this offense? I think we'll see both defenses lead the way in this one, but I'm going with the Bobcats offense. Just a bit more firepower they have to work with and should be able to stave off the upset.
I think that the main reason to choose HBCU is for the family atmosphere. The guys are going to get the core values that their parents taught them, that their family members tried to raise them. You'll have a close-knit atmosphere. You'll actually have guys that care about you as a person. So I think that's the main reason for choosing the HBCU.
As you already know, it's never too early to take a peek at some of the top 2019 NFL draft prospects coming from the FCS. And here's a week 2 look at some of the guys that you should be keeping an eye on. Looking at this list, there are going to be 2 matchups to watch as these teams play one another in week 2. And the first is North Alabama at Alabama A&M, which will give you a great look at wide receiver Isaiah Bailey of the Bulldogs and safety Chris Johnson of the Lions. The 6'3", 200-pound senior safety is on the Senior Bowl watch list to start the season. He's going to be put in a position to patrol the back end of the Lions defense in hopes to coming up with big plays to help them knock off A&M. Now, The other matchup is between Furman and Elon, which will put these two prospects in direct competition against one another in linebacker Warren Messer of Elon and running back Keelan Dirks of Furman. Cornerback Deion Harris of North Dakota is a prospect returning from an Achilles injury last season and was one of the top FCS prospects last year going into the 2017 season. He's a long corner with ball skills that has all of the scouts intrigued about what he can bring to the table this upcoming year, and he is also on the Senior Bowl watch list. Another player that is on that list as well, South Dakota State's quarterback Taron Christian, the 6'2", 225-pound signal caller, didn't play last week as their game against Iowa State was canceled, but make no mistakes about it, Christian has big-time game as he shows precision at all levels of the field while also being a very good athlete to get himself out of trouble on any given play.
Well, the FCS creates so many opportunities for young men. And it's, I think, and you look in our league, it's really the best. It's the best combination of winning football, but also outstanding student athletes. That's really the true model here. And a lot of the FCS programs feel the same way. And, you know, we're blessed to be where we're at here at Lehigh, and everybody else in this league feels the same way. But the FCS, you'll see a lot of people that aren't coming necessarily to the NFL, but what they are is they're becoming leaders of industry, whatever they do when they graduate. And that's really the most important piece of going to college and playing college football, is to getting that degree. And our guys really excel in that response.
Before we get into our Week 2 game previews, this Saturday, check out former Fordham Rams quarterback Mike Niebrick, former Hampton Sydney defensive lineman Jeremy Huber, and myself, the former Raging Cajun, as we'll bring you the call on the Georgetown Campbell broadcast at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. It should be an outstanding matchup between two great head coaches in Rob Scarlatta of Georgetown and Mike Minter of Campbell. You can watch us, or most importantly, watch this game on watchstadium.com, patriotleague.tv, or on Facebook Watch as well. Don't miss it. And now let's get into some Week 2 previews, starting with an intriguing matchup between Valparaiso and Duquesne. The Crusaders kick off their season this week and are looking to make a charge up the Pioneer League standings this season. Head coach Dave Cicchini has done a solid job in turning around this program. They have one of the best linebacking cores in the Pioneer, and they'll need that group to play their best, as the Duke's ground game has both depth and talent, led by running back A.J. Hines. Now, Duquesne was able to get back on the winning track last week with a win over Lock Haven and a 45-0 shutout. Can they stack back-to-back consistent weeks on offense will be the key. I think they can. I like the Dukes. What a big game between two teams from the state of Alabama, as the Alabama A&M Bulldogs travel to take on the North Alabama Lions. Bulldogs' new head coach Connell Maynor knows offense, and his Bulldogs got off to a great start last week against Miles College. Quarterback Akil Glass looked promising as he kicks off his sophomore season. The Lions are fresh off of an upset against Southern Utah, and their offense looked excellent on both ends against the Thunderbirds. Defense will be what wins this one, and I like how the Lions look on the back end, and that'll be the biggest key in slowing down the Bulldogs. I'm taking North Alabama. Hampton and Monmouth played an overtime thriller last season, and this time they meet up in West Long Branch, New Jersey for the rematch. Who can protect the ball will be the winner in this one. It's simple as that. Monmouth's inability to do so last week doomed them against Eastern Michigan. Now the Pirates were able to take care of business against the Shaw Bears as they begin their interesting odyssey called the 2018 schedule. This will be a big game for them as they can build some momentum for their 3 straight D1 games against Tennessee State, Northern Iowa, and Charleston Southern. They match up well against the Hawks along the line of scrimmage, but I like Monmouth in this ball game. Look for the Hawks to right the ship and overtake the Pirates. The Colgate Raiders, fresh off of a Week 1 victory over Holy Cross, takes on another team from New England in the New Hampshire Wildcats. Head coach Dan Hunt's squad flexed its line of scrimmage muscle last week, showing the ability to own the front lines. They face a UNH squad that is coming off of a big loss to Maine and will be without the services of stellar quarterback Trevor Knight. That could be a big problem for their offense in this contest. Now, while Coach O'Connor will galvanize his squad and have them ready to play, look for the Colgate Raiders to keep their foot on the gas and put the Wildcats away early. Pivotal game in the CAA as Albany travels to Rhode Island. This game will be won up front. The Great Danes are known for their ability to win in the trenches, and we'll be looking to get running back Elijah Ibutoken Hanks rolling early. The Rams are coming off of an upset win against Delaware, who, like Albany, are usually strong along the lines of scrimmage. I think what head coach Jim Fleming has done with this team and what he has right now is youthful experience. They have a wealth of lettermen on the squad, and that experience and leadership help them weather the storm against the Blue Hens. With that level of confidence, I think they can knock off Albany once again and push their record to 2-0 on the season. This is a big game out on the West Coast as San Diego takes on UC Davis. We'll get to see two of the FCS best quarterbacks in this game, in the Toreros Anthony Lawrence and the Aggies Jake Meyer. Both teams love to work touchdown and check down in the passing game, so it'll come down to the secondary and who can make enough plays on the ball to win. Or it could come down to which team can play keep away with their running game to shrink the ball game and take away possessions. I think both teams can do both equally as effective, so we should be in for a lot of points scored in this one. I'm going to go with UC Davis in this ball game to outgun the Toreros. There's something special about this team, and they have the look to be a serious player in the Big Sky Conference this season. The Montana State Bobcats are coming off what could be considered an upset victory over Western Illinois and look to do the same against the South Dakota State squad that'll be playing their first game of the season. What a game by Bobcat quarterback Troy Anderson. He was efficient in the passing game and dominant in the running game, going over 140 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. That type of ball control is key versus the Jackrabbits. Defensively, they forced 2 turnovers, which are huge and a big reason for the victory. Can they have an encore performance against South Dakota State? We still don't know what the Jackrabbits offense will look like without tight end Dallas Goddard or wide receiver Jake Winicki, but we do know that their quarterback and their defense will look virtually the same, as Taryn Christian has Peyton Award aspirations, and while they return 7 starters on the defense led by All-American linebacker Christian Roseboom. Look for a defensive slugfest for the good part of this game, with South Dakota State being able to eke out a close victory. Talk about a game between two teams that dealt with unique challenges last week because of weather. Both Fordham and Richmond dealt with delays. The Rams more so in terms of travel to the game as opposed to what they faced when they got there. So let's toss out last week for both squads and chalk it up as a mulligan and look at this as the start of their season, right? Anyway, on the field, this is a strength versus strength matchup as the Rams have an excellent secondary led by cornerback Dylan Maben, and the Spiders' receiving core, in my opinion, is the best in the CAA, led by wide receiver Cortrell Simpson. That'll be the premier matchup in this contest for Fordham to be able to win. The interior of their offensive line will have to make sure to keep quarterback Luke Medlock clean, which means keeping NFL prospect defensive tackle Andrew Clyde out of the backfield. I can see both teams being very similar in this game, which should make for an entertaining watch. Now, I will be at this game after my Georgetown Campbell broadcast, providing some scouting notes and updates from Robins Stadium. I love how week 1 sets up great matchups in week 2 because that's what we have in Pennsylvania as Villanova travels to Lehigh. And I was impressed with the sheer dominance up front by the Villanova Wildcats offensive line against Temple. They had their way all game long and was able to dictate really well. Defensively, the challenge they'll face this week against the Mountain Hawks offense will be how to slow down running back Don Bragalone, who scored 3 touchdowns last week against St. Francis. And speaking of impressive performances, I came away very impressed with Lehigh's defense. They were able to hold the Red Flash offense in check and did a solid job of resetting the line of scrimmage on defense. This game will have a playoff feel to it as these two normally play very good games against one another. I'll go with the Wildcats in this one. A healthy Villanova team is a very dangerous one. In one of our spotlight games of the week, Furman and Elon meet up at Rhodes Stadium for the 3rd time in 2 years. These two played a thriller in the playoffs that saw the Paladins upset the Phoenix at home. The focus for me will be with the Paladins offensive line. This is where they were strong last year, and they're facing a Phoenix front 7 led by linebacker Warren Messer that are very good versus the run and play very good first down defense. It'll be up to quarterback Darren Granger to make enough plays in the passing game to keep that defense honest. That's what the Paladins were able to do last year in the playoff matchup, which ultimately got them the victory. Now, I like Elon in this one. Head coach Kurt Signetti's group does a great job of operating with balance and are a bit stronger along the offensive line, especially at the tackle positions, and should be able to grab the victory. And finally, our stats FCS game of the week is between the Eastern Washington Eagles and the Northern Arizona Lumberjacks in another game that features two of the FCS best at the quarterback position. we have Eastern Washington's Gage Gubrud and Northern Arizona's Case Cook is set to take the field this weekend. The last time these two teams met was back in 2016, and it was a 50-35 Eagles victory. I think this game will see a lot of points scored, but an even closer game. The difference will always come down to which defense can you trust to get a stop, and that has always been a bit of an issue with Eastern Washington over the last few seasons. They weren't bad per se as far as personnel is concerned, but they seem to give up the big play at the most inopportune time. I like the Lumberjacks in this one. As I said in our preseason preview, this team defensively were one of the more underrated in the Big Sky Conference, and they showed that last week versus UTEP in a game in which they dominated. I think they have enough to pressure Gubrud to steal away a couple of possessions. I like Northern Arizona. So that's it for this week's episode of the FCS Kickoff. Be sure to follow us on all of our social media accounts, and be sure to check out and subscribe on iTunes to the Football Game Plan's FCS Opening Drive podcast, where David Hashagen and myself will keep you up to date to what's going on around the FCS.